Welcome to Whisped Tales, where every story inspires growth and learning. Today, we explore the English mindset. Think, speak, and live in English every day. Ethan Parker had always admired people who could effortlessly speak English, express themselves with confidence, and navigate conversations with ease. Growing up in a small town in Ohio, he struggled with self-expression, often hesitating to speak, fearing mistakes, or worrying about sounding awkward. Yet, he knew that mastering English was more than just learning words. It was about thinking, communicating, and ultimately living with clarity and confidence. He longed for a transformation that would allow him to engage fully in work, social settings, and personal growth. Ethan's journey began quietly, with a single commitment. He would immerse himself in English every day, not just in study, but in thought, speech, and lifestyle. He started with small steps, reading articles aloud, noting new vocabulary, and thinking in English rather than his native language. Initially, it felt unnatural. His mind kept translating back and forth, slowing him down. But he persevered, understanding that the mindset of English fluency required consistency, patience, and deliberate practice. He discovered that high achievers and confident communicators didn't just speak English, they thought in English, shaping their perception of the world through the language. Inspired, Ethan began recording his thoughts, narrating daily experiences in English, and describing situations as if he were explaining them to a friend. Simple acts, ordering coffee, talking about his day, or summarizing a news article, became practice in clarity, vocabulary, and confidence. Evenings became a period of reflection. Ethan would review his journal, identify areas where he struggled, and experiment with alternative expressions. He noticed gradual improvements. Sentences became smoother, words came faster, and ideas flowed more naturally. More importantly, his confidence grew, shifting the way he approached challenges. English was no longer just a subject to learn, it was a tool to think clearly, communicate effectively, and live intentionally. As Ethan progressed, he realized that immersing in English required more than words. It demanded a shift in mindset. Thinking in English meant reframing how he approached daily situations. Instead of planning his day in his native language and translating, he started visualizing his tasks, conversations, and ideas directly in English. This subtle change was powerful. It reduced hesitation, made speech more fluid, and allowed him to react naturally in conversations without overthinking. Ethan also began integrating English into every aspect of his life. At work, he drafted emails, reports, and presentations in English first, resisting the urge to translate. In social settings, he engaged in small talk, described events, and shared opinions entirely in English. Even when alone, he practiced narrating his thoughts, from planning meals to reflecting on the day. Over time, this constant immersion rewired his brain, making English a natural lens through which he perceived the world. A turning point came when Ethan decided to record himself speaking for 10 minutes each day. At first, listening back was uncomfortable. He noticed mispronunciations, awkward phrasing, and moments of hesitation. But instead of giving up, he used the recordings as a roadmap, highlighting areas for improvement and experimenting with new expressions. Within weeks, his confidence skyrocketed. The act of speaking daily, combined with mindful reflection, accelerated both fluency and clarity of thought. Ethan also discovered that living in English was about embracing mistakes as part of the journey. Early on, he feared judgment or embarrassment, but he observed fluent speakers. Even the most confident communicators occasionally faltered. What set them apart was their ability to continue speaking without letting mistakes undermine their message. Inspired, Ethan adopted the same mindset. Progress mattered more than perfection. Each misstep became a lesson, each correction a step closer to mastery. By the end of this chapter, Ethan began to notice a transformation. Thinking, speaking, and living in English was no longer a conscious effort, it was becoming habitual. His ideas felt clearer, his words flowed naturally, and he approached life with a growing sense of confidence. He understood that the English mindset was not just about language, it was about thinking, acting, and living deliberately. With consistent practice, Ethan began to realize that the English mindset extended beyond vocabulary and grammar. It shaped perception and decision-making. Thinking in English encouraged clarity, precision, and logical organization of ideas. When faced with problems, he would mentally articulate solutions in English, structuring his thoughts before acting. This habit improved not only his communication, but also his ability to analyze, prioritize, and make decisions efficiently. He noticed a profound connection between language and cognition. The more he lived in English, the sharper his thinking became. Ethan also sought out immersive experiences. He joined online English discussion groups, attended webinars, and interacted with native speakers through virtual platforms. Each conversation challenged him to think quickly, articulate ideas accurately, and adapt to diverse accents and expressions. Initially intimidating, these interactions became exciting exercises in real-world English usage. He discovered that fluency wasn't just about speaking perfectly, it was about engaging authentically, conveying ideas, and connecting with others. He began applying this mindset to everyday situations. Ordering at cafes, navigating public transport, and casual conversations with colleagues became deliberate practice opportunities. Ethan created mental scripts in English for recurring scenarios, ensuring he could respond naturally and confidently. Over time, his comfort level increased, and mistakes became less frequent and less intimidating. English was no longer a subject to study, it was a way of life, shaping how he interacted with the world around him. Another pivotal realization came when Ethan started journaling exclusively in English. Writing his reflections, experiences, and ideas daily strengthened not only his grammar and vocabulary, but also his ability to express complex thoughts clearly. He reviewed past entries to track progress, noticing recurring mistakes and improved phrasing over time. This feedback loop accelerated learning, reinforced the English mindset, and made him increasingly confident in both written and spoken communication. By the end of this chapter, Ethan understood that thinking, speaking, and living in English was not a temporary effort, it was a transformative lifestyle. Every interaction, thought, and reflection in English reinforced clarity, confidence, and deliberate action. He began to see the world differently, viewing challenges as opportunities to communicate, learn, and grow. As Ethan's journey progressed, he discovered that consistency was the cornerstone of the English mindset. Speaking, thinking, and living in English every day became a non-negotiable habit rather than a task. He set aside specific times each morning and evening for immersive practice, reading aloud, summarizing articles, recording thoughts, and engaging in conversation online. At first, maintaining this consistency required discipline, especially on days when fatigue or work stress tempted him to skip practice. But Ethan understood that mastery was built through repetition, not occasional bursts of effort. He also explored the concept of contextual learning.
realizing that English is more than grammar rules. It's about understanding nuances, expressions, and cultural cues. Watching English podcasts, movies, and interviews, he paid attention to tone, phrasing, and body language. Mimicking these elements in his daily interactions helped him sound more natural and confident. This approach transformed his learning from mechanical memorization to experiential immersion, where language became intertwined with thought and action.
At work, Ethan applied his English mindset strategically. During team meetings, he prepared his points in English before speaking, ensuring clarity and structure. He began participating actively in brainstorming sessions, offering insights, asking questions, and confidently contributing to discussions. Colleagues noticed his growing assertiveness, and some even sought advice on improving their own English communication. Ethan realized that the mindset wasn't just personal growth, it also allowed him to influence and inspire others. Beyond professional life, Ethan embraced English in social and personal contexts. He described his daily experiences aloud, thought in English during decision-making, and even reflected on personal goals using the language. This constant immersion created a sense of fluency that transcended technical accuracy. It became a way of thinking, problem-solving, and living. Mistakes no longer discouraged him. They were markers of active learning. Each day, each interaction, and each reflection reinforced his commitment to live fully in English. By the end of this chapter, Ethan's mindset had shifted profoundly. English was no longer a skill he practiced in isolation. It had become a lens through which he viewed the world, approached challenges, and expressed his identity. The journey from hesitant speaker to confident thinker in English was well underway, laying the foundation for mastery in every area of life. With the foundation of daily practice firmly established, Ethan began exploring the power of active thinking in English. He noticed that when he framed thoughts directly in English, his reasoning became clearer, more structured, and more decisive. Decisions that once felt muddled were now approached methodically. He would describe the problem in English, list options mentally, evaluate consequences, and select the best course of action. Thinking in English was no longer just a language exercise. It had become a cognitive tool that enhanced focus, clarity, and confidence. He also recognized the importance of speaking out loud as a bridge between thought and action. He started narrating his day, describing his plans, reflecting on interactions, and even debating ideas aloud in English. At first, it felt unusual and self-conscious, but he persisted, understanding that the brain forms stronger connections when thoughts are verbalized. This habit not only improved fluency, but also strengthened his ability to respond quickly in conversations without hesitation or reliance on translation. He took a bold step by joining an online English discussion forum where participants discussed real-world topics ranging from current events to personal growth. Ethan initially felt nervous. The fear of making mistakes was strong, but he reminded himself that high achievers embrace discomfort. He participated actively, expressing opinions, asking questions, and responding to feedback. Each discussion honed his vocabulary, built confidence, and provided insight into how English speakers naturally express ideas. Mistakes became stepping stones, and progress became tangible. Simultaneously, Ethan integrated English into his creative pursuits. He began writing short reflections, journaling stories, and even narrating fictional scenes in English. This practice allowed him to think imaginatively in English, expanding his expressive range and enhancing the natural flow of his thoughts. Over time, speaking, thinking, and living in English became effortless, a mindset rather than a task. Every action reinforced the habit, shaping a mental environment where English was the primary mode of expression. By the end of this chapter, Ethan had internalized a critical lesson. Fluency is not just about speaking or writing, it is about aligning your mind, thoughts, and daily life with English. Language becomes a lens through which you interpret experiences, solve problems, and express your identity. The English mindset was no longer a goal, it had become a natural part of who he was. As Ethan delved deeper into the English mindset, he discovered that immersion alone wasn't enough. Intentionality was key. He began setting specific goals for his English practice, such as mastering idiomatic expressions, improving pronunciation, and articulating complex ideas clearly. Each goal was linked to real-life application. He would practice idioms during conversations, correct pronunciation during presentations, and rehearse explanations of complex concepts in English. This purposeful approach accelerated his progress, transforming learning from passive exposure into active skill building. Ethan also realized that environment shapes mindset. He created an English-rich environment by surrounding himself with books, podcasts, and news articles in English, labeling household items in English, and even thinking through daily plans and errands entirely in English. At work, he consciously adopted English in emails, chats, and meetings, even when colleagues used a different language. This constant exposure reinforced his fluency and made thinking, speaking, and living in English a seamless part of daily life. Another breakthrough came when Ethan applied the English mindset to social interactions. He challenged himself to converse confidently with native speakers and articulate thoughts without hesitation. Mistakes, once feared, became tools for learning and connecting. He observed how native speakers structured ideas, used humor, and conveyed emotion, and he practiced mirroring these techniques. Over time, he noticed a shift. His speech became more fluid, natural, and expressive, and he felt a newfound sense of confidence and presence. Ethan also discovered the importance of reflective feedback. He recorded conversations, presentations, and self-narrations, reviewing them critically to identify areas for improvement. This habit, combined with journaling and self-assessment, allowed him to track growth, celebrate milestones, and correct recurring mistakes. He realized that high achievers in language, just like in life, combine practice with reflection, learning not only from successes but also from missteps. By the end of this chapter, Ethan's English mindset was fully taking root. Thinking, speaking, and living in English were no longer deliberate exercises. They had become his default mode. Every interaction, reflection, and expression reinforced fluency, clarity, and confidence, making English not just a language, but a lens through which he viewed and engaged with the world. Ethan's journey now emphasized confidence in real-life communication. He realized that fluency was not only about knowing words, but also about expressing ideas naturally, even when imperfect. He started actively participating in group discussions, virtual meetings, and casual conversations, deliberately choosing situations that pushed him slightly outside his comfort zone. The more he practiced, the more he noticed a transformation, not just in his speech, but in his mindset. Hesitation and fear gave way to curiosity, engagement, and authentic expression.
He also explored the concept of thinking in English during decision-making. Previously, Ethan would internally translate from his native language, which slowed his responses and sometimes led to confusion. By consciously framing problems, options, and solutions directly in English, he improved clarity of thought and decisiveness. Simple tasks like planning a project or writing an email became exercises in logical structuring and precise expression. This habit reinforced his fluency and trained his mind to operate seamlessly in English. To strengthen his skills further, Ethan adopted immersive storytelling techniques. Each evening, he narrated his day in English, describing events, emotions, and reflections as if telling a story to an audience. Over time, these self-created narratives enhanced vocabulary, pronunciation, and expressive nuance. He also experimented with creating dialogues, imagining conversations in different scenarios, which prepared him to respond naturally in real-life interactions. Mistakes were reframed as learning opportunities, and every attempt strengthened his confidence. A pivotal moment came when Ethan was invited to lead a presentation at work entirely in English. He prepared meticulously, rehearsing key points, anticipating questions, and practicing delivery aloud. The presentation went smoothly. His colleagues and supervisors were impressed by his clarity, confidence, and composure. The experience reinforced a fundamental principle of the English mindset. It's not about perfection, it's about consistent practice, authentic expression, and thinking in the language itself. By the end of this chapter, Ethan understood that living in English meant integrating it into thought, action, and personal identity, making fluency a natural, empowering part of life. As Ethan's confidence grew, he began to explore the power of language in shaping perspective. He noticed that thinking in English influenced not only communication, but also problem-solving, creativity, and emotional clarity. When he faced challenges, he mentally described situations in English, articulated possible solutions, and evaluated outcomes in the language itself. This practice made his thinking more structured and deliberate, and it helped him approach problems with calm and confidence. Ethan realized that living in English was not just about speaking fluently, it was about cultivating a mindset that organizes and enhances thought. He also experimented with immersive environments for accelerated learning. Ethan started consuming English media intentionally: news, podcasts, motivational talks, and literature. Each medium introduced him to new vocabulary, idioms, and expressions, while exposing him to different accents and cultural nuances. He reflected on what he learned and applied it in daily interactions, gradually noticing improvements in fluency, comprehension, and adaptability. The more he immersed himself, the more English became a lens through which he understood the world. Ethan extended the English mindset to social and professional networking. He reached out to native speakers and international colleagues, initiating conversations and actively listening to their perspectives. Initially, fear of mistakes persisted, but he reframed them as opportunities for growth and learning. Engaging authentically, asking questions, and expressing thoughts confidently strengthened both his linguistic skills and his social connections. He realized that mastery involved not just internal practice, but meaningful, real-world communication. Finally, Ethan began integrating English into personal reflection and goal setting. He wrote journals, outlined plans, and evaluated progress entirely in English. This habit reinforced the mindset daily, training his brain to process life in English naturally. Mistakes became markers of progress, not obstacles. By the end of this chapter, Ethan had fully embraced the philosophy that thinking, speaking, and living in English every day transforms both language skills and personal growth, creating a foundation for continuous improvement and self-expression. Ethan now focused on integrating English into creative thinking and problem-solving. He discovered that when he approached ideas, plans, or challenges entirely in English, his solutions became clearer and more structured. He practiced describing abstract concepts, brainstorming strategies, and analyzing outcomes, all mentally narrated in English. Over time, his thought process became faster, more precise, and more confident. This habit showed him that the English mindset wasn't limited to speaking. It actively shaped reasoning, planning, and decision-making.
To push his skills further, Ethan embraced conversation as practice, not performance. He joined virtual discussion groups, interacted with peers, and even debated topics on unfamiliar subjects. Each interaction tested his fluency, adaptability, and confidence. Mistakes were inevitable, but he treated them as stepping stones. The English mindset, he realized, is about courageous expression, engaging fully, learning from errors, and improving through real-life use. He also began a daily narrative exercise. Each night, Ethan recounted his day aloud in English, describing events, reflections, and emotions with detail and clarity. He experimented with storytelling, imagining dialogues, and visualizing interactions with friends, colleagues, or clients. This routine strengthened both his vocabulary and expressive nuance, making him more comfortable in spontaneous conversations. Speaking in English became not just practice, but a natural way to organize and communicate his experiences. A defining moment came when Ethan was asked to lead an international virtual meeting. With multiple participants from different countries, clarity and confidence were critical. He prepared his points in English, anticipated questions, and practiced responses aloud. During the meeting, he communicated smoothly, engaged participants, and handled unexpected questions with composure. The experience reinforced a key principle. The English mindset is living in the language daily, internalizing it, and applying it boldly in real situations. By the end of this chapter, Ethan's life was increasingly aligned with the English mindset. Every thought, conversation, and reflection was now infused with English, shaping clarity, confidence, and self-expression. He understood that the journey was ongoing, but the foundation of thinking, speaking, and living in English was firmly established. As Ethan progressed, he began to realize the power of intentional listening in the English mindset. Speaking and thinking in English were crucial, but truly understanding others required focused attention to tone, vocabulary, and cultural context. He started actively listening to podcasts, news discussions, and conversations among native speakers, noting expressions, sentence structures, and intonation patterns. By mimicking these patterns in his own speech, Ethan enhanced his pronunciation, rhythm, and overall fluency. Listening became not just comprehension, but a tool to internalize authentic English communication. He also experimented with mental rehearsal. Before meetings, social gatherings, or presentations, Ethan visualized interactions entirely in English. He imagined questions, responses, and conversational flows, rehearsing language, tone, and clarity in his mind. This technique reduced anxiety, increased spontaneity, and strengthened his ability to think and respond directly in English without translation. Over time, mental rehearsal became a natural part of his preparation for both professional and personal situations.
Ethan's immersion extended to creative expression. He wrote short essays, narrated personal stories, and even practiced fictional dialogues entirely in English. These exercises honed vocabulary, expressive nuance, and grammatical accuracy. More importantly, they reinforced the habit of thinking in English first, then speaking or writing. Each reflection strengthened the link between cognition and language, making fluency a seamless part of daily life. Finally, Ethan realized that living in English required embracing mistakes with confidence. Early in his journey, errors caused hesitation and self-doubt. But by reframing mistakes as feedback and learning opportunities, he grew more resilient and proactive. Conversations became more fluid, presentations more confident, and daily thought more structured. By the end of this chapter, Ethan fully embodied the principle that thinking, speaking, and living in English daily is not just about language, it is a mindset that enhances clarity, confidence, and life itself.
Ethan's journey advanced as he explored English as a medium for self-reflection and personal growth. He began journaling in English every morning and evening, not just recording events, but analyzing his thoughts, emotions, and decisions. This practice deepened his self-awareness, teaching him to articulate feelings clearly and reason logically. Thinking in English helped him frame challenges as opportunities, refine goals, and evaluate progress more effectively. He realized that the language itself became a tool for thinking critically and organizing life. He also discovered the value of peer interaction and feedback. Ethan connected with English-speaking friends, colleagues, and mentors, actively seeking corrections and suggestions. At first, hearing mistakes pointed out was uncomfortable, but he reframed it as an invaluable part of learning. Constructive feedback accelerated improvement and encouraged him to experiment with more complex sentences, idiomatic expressions, and persuasive communication. The English mindset, he understood, thrives on active participation and openness to growth. Immersion in media further strengthened Ethan's fluency. He watched English documentaries, TED Talks, and motivational videos, taking notes and mimicking pronunciation and expressions. He practiced summarizing content in his own words, debating key points, and discussing lessons with peers. Each exercise reinforced thinking in English, enhancing comprehension, articulation, and confidence in everyday conversations. A turning point came when Ethan participated in a public discussion group entirely in English, addressing complex topics and sharing personal insights. Initially nervous, he relied on his daily habits, thinking first in English, narrating ideas clearly, and staying open to feedback. The experience was transformative. He realized that consistent practice, immersion, and intentional thinking allowed him to communicate fluently, confidently, and authentically in any setting. By the end of this chapter, Ethan's life was firmly guided by the English mindset, where language shaped thought, action, and personal growth. Ethan now focused on expanding the English mindset into leadership and influence. He recognized that thinking and speaking fluently in English opened doors to collaboration, mentorship, and leadership opportunities. At work, he began facilitating meetings, presenting strategies, and guiding team discussions entirely in English. His preparation included rehearsing key points, anticipating questions, and mentally structuring ideas in English. The result was clear, confident communication that inspired trust and respect among colleagues.
He also explored storytelling as a tool for influence. Ethan realized that high achievers communicate ideas effectively by crafting narratives, illustrating points, and connecting emotionally. He practiced telling stories in English about personal experiences, historical events, or hypothetical scenarios, focusing on clarity, engagement, and vocabulary. This practice not only improved fluency, but also helped him become a more persuasive communicator, able to explain complex ideas in ways others could easily understand. Ethan embraced networking with intent. He joined professional groups, discussion forums, and virtual events, connecting with native English speakers and global peers. These interactions challenged him to adapt, respond spontaneously, and communicate authentically. He learned to observe nuances in expression, humor, and tone, integrating these lessons into his own speech. Over time, he noticed that fluency in English wasn't just about accuracy, it was about connection, influence, and adaptability. By the end of this chapter, Ethan's English mindset had grown beyond personal mastery. It had become a tool for leadership, influence, and meaningful interaction, allowing him to think strategically, communicate effectively, and inspire others. Living in English was no longer confined to practice sessions.
It had become the lens through which he approached life, work, and growth. Ethan's journey now emphasized living fully in English across all areas of life, not just in work or study. He integrated English into personal routines, from planning his day to reflecting on experiences, and even during casual activities like shopping or exercising. Every thought, self-instruction, and internal dialogue became an opportunity to reinforce fluency. This immersion helped him think quickly, respond naturally, and express complex ideas without hesitation. The English mindset had shifted from a practice to a default way of living and thinking. He also explored critical thinking in English, framing challenges, decisions, and reflections entirely in the language. For example, when weighing career opportunities, Ethan wrote pros and cons in English, analyzed outcomes, and made plans for personal and professional growth. This habit sharpened his reasoning and decision-making, showing that language could shape thought and perception. English became not just a communication tool, but a framework for clarity, logic, and intentional living. Social interactions continued to reinforce his mindset. Ethan engaged with international friends, mentors, and colleagues, expressing ideas confidently and navigating diverse cultural contexts. He noticed that fluency was not simply about grammar. It was about adapting communication style, tone, and vocabulary to context, and conveying meaning authentically. Over time, his confidence and competence grew, allowing him to participate meaningfully in discussions, negotiations, and collaborative projects. Finally, Ethan reflected on his journey and realized a powerful truth. Living, thinking, and speaking in English every day transformed his identity, habits, and mindset. It enabled him to approach life with clarity, confidence, and purpose. By the end of this chapter, he had fully internalized the English mindset, understanding that mastery is a lifestyle, one that enhances thought, expression, and engagement with the world. Ethan's practice now focused on refining nuance and cultural understanding in English. He realized that true fluency was not only about grammar or vocabulary, but also about capturing subtle meanings, tone, and context. To achieve this, he began reading novels, watching interviews, and observing native speakers' conversational patterns. He paid attention to idioms, humor, and phrasing that conveyed emotion or persuasion. By mimicking and practicing these subtleties in daily interactions, Ethan's English became richer, more expressive, and more natural. He also embraced public speaking as a tool for mastery. Ethan volunteered to give short talks at local clubs and online meetups, presenting ideas entirely in English. Preparing for these talks required him to think strategically about language, structure, and clarity. He rehearsed extensively, recorded himself, and refined delivery based on feedback. Each session improved pronunciation, pacing, and confidence, reinforcing the habit of thinking and speaking fluently under pressure. Ethan's social circles expanded internationally. He engaged in discussions with people from diverse backgrounds, exchanging ideas and perspectives entirely in English. These interactions taught him adaptability and cultural sensitivity, essential aspects of communication that go beyond vocabulary. He learned to listen actively, respond thoughtfully, and use language to build rapport. Over time, fluency became second nature, enabling him to interact authentically and confidently in any context. By the end of this chapter, Ethan had achieved a critical milestone. English had become his default language for thought, expression, and social interaction. It was no longer an effort or study habit. It was a fully integrated part of his life, shaping how he approached challenges, built relationships, and pursued personal growth. The English mindset had become a lifestyle, empowering him to communicate, connect, and thrive naturally.
Ethan had now fully embraced the English mindset, living, thinking, and speaking in English every day. The transformation went beyond language. It reshaped his confidence, clarity, and personal growth. English was no longer a skill he needed to practice. It was the lens through which he organized his thoughts, made decisions, and interacted with the world. Every conversation, reflection, and task became an opportunity to reinforce fluency and critical thinking. At work, Ethan was a confident communicator, capable of leading meetings, presenting ideas, and collaborating across cultures. He noticed that his colleagues respected not only his language skills, but also his clarity of thought, assertiveness, and adaptability. Beyond work, he engaged effortlessly in social interactions, online discussions, and mentorship opportunities. The English mindset had allowed him to connect meaningfully, influence positively, and express authentically. Ethan's personal growth extended to self-reflection and creativity. Journaling, storytelling, and narrating experiences in English sharpened his reasoning, imagination, and emotional clarity. Mistakes no longer discouraged him. They were reminders of progress and tools for learning. Each day reinforced his identity as someone who thinks, speaks, and lives in English, blending fluency with life mastery. Thank you for joining us today on Whisped Tales. Ethan's story demonstrates that the English mindset is not just about speaking a language, it is about thinking clearly, expressing confidently, and living intentionally. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring lessons. Next time, we'll bring you another tale that combines personal growth, motivation, and practical strategies to help you thrive in life. Remember, think in English, speak in English, and live in English every day. Your mindset shapes your future.